love to open the evening for Imke Hansen, and I am so glad that she came and she offered us the 1 hour lesson about how to work with Ukrainian people. And I am here from SE Ukraine Task Force, and I'm so glad that so many SEPs came, and I hope that you will enjoy your evening, and the word is yours, Imke.
Thank you very much, Zlata. Thank you for the invitation and the introduction. Let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Imke Hansen, and I'm a researcher, and for the past 25 years, I was working on experience of violence, with oral history and participant observation. So I have a 25 years track record of talking to people with people who were exposed to systemic violence, mainly torture. At the same time, I'm a practitioner. I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner, of course, but also I'm a practitioner when it comes to trauma-informed training. In the past years, I was training mainly in East Ukraine, in the Donbass. I was training police groups, teachers, teenagers, activists, all kinds of people who were confronted very much with the difficulties of society when you live in a society that is confronted directly with war. Since 2015-16, I'm working in this context, and for the past year, I've been living in Severodonetsk. I would be living there now, but as you know, as you have probably heard, it's one of the most mentioned names now in the news. So Severodonetsk is under fierce fighting, and for now, there is no possibility to be there right now. So this is about me. If you want to know anything else, like later, I can answer questions. I would like to do a trigger warning, because I mean this is like a discussion and a lecture about how to deal with people who are directly and freshly affected by war, and there might be things that trigger. And I have prepared a presentation with photos, and even though I try to take the most light photos to illustrate what I've been doing and seeing in the past weeks, I would just like to tell you that this is what's going to come. So the basic question that I would like to discuss with you today is how to work with war-affected people from Ukraine. And I am basically working with war-affected people from Ukraine, in Ukraine. And for me, it's great to see your interest in all countries, Europe, the US, to work with war-affected people in other places than Ukraine. Because this is something me and my organization have a hard time to do. So this is actually really great. So how to work with war-affected people from Ukraine? I would like to break this question down in 3 sections. One section is about the special characteristics of war-affected people in Ukraine right now. The other will be how to work with that. And the third will be what helps me, what can help me personally to be able to work that way, to be able to work with it. I will go through the 3 sections in a row, and then we will have time for questions. So what are the characteristics of people with who have fled from Ukraine, who are still in Ukraine, who have experienced the war? First, of course, it is a very fresh experience. It's not like grown up coming with childhood trauma. It's not anything. It's like super fresh, and it's so fresh that most people, or maybe not most people, many people will still be more in the stress response than out of it. And this is very important to understand, because this also very much influences on how they might perceive you. The second is that people are coupled through the media, through millions of Telegram groups and channels and chat groups and everything. They are permanently coupled with what is happening right now in Ukraine, even though they might be in a different country. Even though they might be in a relatively safe country, they are permanently somehow there. I mean, we all know that our brain doesn't really differentiate, that doesn't really distinguish between what the body physically experiences and what is in our imagination or what pictures we perceive. So you can imagine how this is for people to get this like steady news flow if it is actually your house burning there, if it is your brother fighting in Mariupol, or if it is your mother or your aunt under Russian occupation in one of the eastern parts of the countries. I'm sure you all feel what the news do to you, so it will be probably easy for you to understand this, the extent of coupledness that these people have with what is going on every day. Also, the situation is very volatile. It's changing a lot. We might have later a little bit time to speak about it, but this also impacts this coupledness. The third is Ukrainians experience this war against a backdrop of historical crises. And if we just look at the past 100 years, you have World War II and the Russian Revolution. You have World War I and the Russian Revolution. You have World War II, which was not only an occupation, but also deportation of many, many slave laborers to the German Reich, with a lot of slave labor within the country, like the whole Donbass, all the coal mines, everything was run with slave labor then. And of course, also a time of mass killing, witnessing mass killing. So that was a period with a lot of possibilities of traumatization. Right before it was the Holodomor, like the artificial famine orchestrated by Joseph Stalin in Ukraine. So like a really fierce famine that people suffered from a lot, and that has influenced Ukrainian culture and habits very strongly until today. After World War II, the continuation of the Soviet regime, which can also be called a crisis in itself. 1986, Chernobyl. I'm sure most of you remember. In the 1990s, there was the transformation, which was like a very, very difficult process, hardcore, with a lot of criminality, with a lot of chaos. So it's one of the most underestimated chapters in East European and particularly in Ukrainian history. 2004, the Orange Revolution, and 2014, the war began. The annexation of, like, Russia annexed the Crimea, the annexation of Crimea, and the invasion in Donbass. And now we have 2022. So you see, like, every decade can offer, basically every decade has a different event, and they range from catastrophes like Chernobyl to revolutions to wars. It's to famines. Like it's a pretty like rich choice of what you have when you work with people, and when you keep in mind that it's not only this war, it's not only their story, but there is a lot of transgenerational baggage coming with this. Another thing that is not so characteristic for Ukraine, but maybe for all Eastern Europe, is that there is a different trajectory when it comes to psychology and body-oriented methods. So psychology in the Soviet Union was strongly discriminated against as a bourgeois quasi-science that is actually only harming people, that is trying to get into the minds of people and twisting them. This still impacts the readiness of people to seek out for help. Trauma therapy, body-oriented techniques are relatively new in Ukraine. And for Ukrainians, there is an EMDR community that is growing, but still most people in Ukraine have never heard about body-oriented techniques, about EMDR, and also like not about somatic experiencing. There has never been a full somatic somatic experiencing training. There was one single intro in Ukraine that was in last December, and I was lucky enough to be an assistant on that training that was run by Rachi and Doris, our senior assistant. I see she's also here in the audience. So we're coming to the second part of the main question: how to actually deal, how to work with war-affected people. And this question is the most easy of all, because you just work like with everyone else in somatic experiencing. So you work with your openness and curiosity, just that in face of war and torture, it's a little bit, it can be a little bit more difficult to keep this openness and curiosity. We will come to that later. You work with the belief that the other person has everything within them they need to integrate this trauma and to let the nervous system find its path, the path that it chooses. This also might be a little bit more difficult in face of what we know about what these people might have experienced. You work with self-regulation and co-regulation. And that also means like, I need to feel safe. I need to feel safe in that moment, which can also be a little bit difficult if we have not much experience with war, if we cannot really understand what people have been through and where they are now and where they are in their minds. And we work on eye level. We work as a human, meeting a human, like talking about completely human stuff. Just very often, this will be human stuff that you have not experienced yet. And I mean, this is a good thing, but this also might make this difficult. It might make it difficult not to speak to people as like pitying them or as like trying to help them at any expense, right? So we're going to talk about these difficulties. The difficulty to keep an open attention, the difficulty to feel safe and feel curious. And of course, the difficulty to like create a huge container and keep eye level while you're working with people. And I think what is most effective for us as practitioners is like what you know, what all of you know about and all of you work with. It's orientation, movement, and contact. So I will just explain how I think that works. First of all, orientation. It's important to acknowledge that war is not a black box. War is actually a landscape, and we can orient in this landscape as well as our clients can orient in this landscape. And to provide you now with a basic orientation in this landscape, I brought some pictures, and I will try to switch them on now. So can you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Right. About the pictures, most of the pictures have been taken last week or the week before when I was traveling through Ukraine, and I spent some time in the formerly occupied and now liberated parts of Chernihiv, of Sumy, And we were in Kiev, so you will see very fresh images now, and experiences from the past, from basically the past 2-3 weeks. So one very important part of this landscape is of course warfare, right? It's combat, it's shelling, it's airstrikes, and it's the destruction that is left behind. On the left hand, you see a man standing in front of his house, and he was just about to tell us, because we were monitoring what has happened, monitoring human rights violations, and he turned to us and wanted to start to talk about his house, and then he turned back to the house, and it took him a couple of minutes to get into the state that he can actually talk about it. So he had this short encounter with his house, or what remains of it, before he could talk to us. These pictures are not the worst ones, and they very much show how it looks like in many parts of Ukraine right now. And I want to talk a little bit about what has caused it, because this is like the experience that are connected with this landscape, right? And the experience is, of course, like the first that happens, or the most frequent thing, something that happens every day actually, is air raid alarm. Air raid alarm you have right now throughout Ukraine, and it's actually dealt with very differently. Like people who live in areas that have been bombed, that have experienced airstrike, usually take it very serious and run to the bomb shelters and keep in the bomb shelters. In the cities that are more affected by airstrikes, people treat it rather seriously, but you also have places like Uzhhorod, where no airstrike ever has hit the city, where people are still kind of easy with that. Still, when you have air raid alarm, for example, in the evening when you have air raid alarm, all the street lights turn off, like the cafes turn off their lights. It needs to, like the darkening is a factor that really impacts the landscape, and that can also leave traces in people. In Chernihiv, for example, you still, like almost everywhere you have curfew. In Chernihiv, you have curfew at 10 o'clock in the evening, and after curfew, you cannot have a lightened window. So either you darken your window or you just switch out your light. Like you have a darkness, you experience a darkness that you are normally not used to in an industrialized world. The next experience is the experience of bomb shelter. And also this can be very, very different, right? I mean, people who spend days and weeks with their crying children in the bomb shelters will have a very different experience of the one that I'm talking about now. So we had a training in Lviv for psychologists and social workers about how to work with it now, how to be trauma informed, how to integrate body-oriented ideas and practices into our daily work with refugees, with internal displaced persons. And we were like having this training and with balls and Hoberman sphere and whatever is needed, like was all very colorful. And then we had air raid alarm. So we opened the basement, everyone went down into the basement, and we sat there. It was dark. What we have now, like what is the feeling now? What is the fear now? What could help us now? And it was like we were down there for like 45 minutes or maximum an hour. And afterwards, many people said like this was the most effective part of the training. A, because it was a real situation, and B, because they very much asked me, like, because as the trainer, like, what do you feel now? And what do you do now? So bomb shelter experiences are not always horrible and negative. Bomb shelter experiences can often have a character of community, can have a character of helping each other, of being there for each other, of being close with others. This can be, it's like we cannot judge it. It can be horrible, it can be very hopeful, and it can be both at the same time. So this is very much like SE, like just perceive it as it is there both at the same time. Of course, you hear hitting, like rockets hitting buildings. And I think I do not have to talk to you about it a lot, because you all know that this can leave very much triggering material in the body. Of course, you have a social landscape changing, like losing family, losing friends, being hurt, very much also being separated. And the separation now is not like the separation was there already in 2014-15, when people from the East moved, mothers and grandfathers and fathers stayed in the East. So there you already had a separation on the generational axis. But now you also have a separation on the gender axis, because men cannot leave the country anymore. Men between 18 and 55 are not allowed to leave the country. Men are often in the army. Women are trying to find more safe places. So you have a huge separation in families. Loss of home and material values. This is something you can see here on the pictures. Of course, is very impacting. And also what I find is like the general destruction. You drive your bike because like the shop in your village has just opened a couple of days ago again. You drive through destruction. Like you need to organize something, you might find something in the rubble. Like it's destruction everywhere. And even though you see it every day, it still has an impact, right? And every new house, even though I have seen thousands of houses like this, like every new house is again this, like you feel this activization almost with every image, in my experience. So the other part of this landscape is occupation, which is also often connected with captivity and even with torture. Occupation means Russian army comes in, builds checkpoints at around a place and doesn't allow anyone in or out, and is establishing an occupation regime in the place, which oftentimes people are forced to stay in some basement or bomb shelter or some other place. Very often they cannot get out of there for days, for weeks. They experience food shortage. They don't have any access to water, like fresh drinking water, sanitary or like hygiene, like shower. They have no access to medical care. People told us about their neighbors and like people from their village dying in the bomb shelter while they were there. And they couldn't bring them to the cemetery, like they couldn't bury them during this occupation. They did that all afterward to follow the tradition. It seemed to me in several cases even worse than the people dying. Like they were talking about the people dying still as something natural, but then this not being able to do what you're supposed to do in the moment when someone dies in your culture hit many people very hard. Of course, there's also this movement of being threatened, being humiliated by Russian soldiers, trying to understand what they're up to, trying to understand the situation, trying to control the situation, to be somehow able to identify where are the moments of safety, where are the small spaces of safety where I can be. This is all very much a part of this experience. Again, of course, impacts because you are still under shelling, and in some cases killing, torture, and rape. We have all heard the names Bucha and Irpin. And even though this is like what is in media very present now, there are many, many more places with maybe not the same quantitative extent, but still with the same stories. And it's for one village, like one story is even enough to create like general fear and disgust. What I also want to share with you, what I found really interesting, is how people speak about Russian soldiers. They speak about them like orcs. Orcs, these are these like from Lord of the Ring, like these huge creatures, like cognitively not very well developed, but like very violent and very brutal. So they actually really say, when they meet the Russians, they say the orcs very, very often. And they tell stories that actually illustrate their uncivilized character. Like a story I heard in many villages is when they took an electric kettle and they put it on the stove, like on the oven, because they didn't understand the electricity in it. The third huge like chapter of landscape is evacuation, relocation, displacement. And this is something I will stay with very shortly, because you know a whole part of it already very well, because there are refugees in your country. Evacuation is often taking place in chaotic, might be short. Very often there are promises of creating a green corridor. A green corridor means an evacuation or several evacuation buses can leave without being attacked. Then they are attacked, or the green corridor is not happening or postponed. So it's a hugely insecure place and period of time. So it's not really surprising that many people choose not to evacuate. So their basement still seems safer than this going out and doing this evacuation. Relocation and displacement comes with all the features it usually comes with, like lack of orientation, lack of feeling, like with helplessness, with lack of feeling the possibilities to act. Important also, like also for other countries, but also for Ukraine, people are mostly sheltered in schools or kindergarten. So several people in one classroom, no privacy, also no privacy for teenagers or kids who you can see on this picture, who try to find some privacy to try to isolate in some spaces. But in general, the situation is very, very much characterized by limits. Very quickly, what you can see in people when you are in touch with people who have been exposed to that. And I'm giving you an example from a week ago, where we were in a school that had been occupied by Russian soldiers. There was like the headquarters, one of the headquarters was in there, like everything was destroyed. And the man you can see who's talking to us like this is the director of the school. And he has been 37 years director of the school. And now his school was destroyed and the grounds were destroyed. I mean, it's still possible to renovate it, but he was enraged about like, how could that be possible? An educational institution, like how could they do things like that? And he talked to us for 1.5 hours. And I chose only one picture, but really in almost every picture, he was fighting still, like he was still very much in the fight response. And you can see it here, like he's actually in a classroom. This is already like towards the end. So he already had been talking for an hour and he is still very much in a very typical fighting position. What you see in other people is of course that they are easily triggered, excited, aggression, alert, like not very trustful, perceiving danger everywhere. So the very, very normal signs of like being stuck on. And what is very interesting in this context is that many people carry this stuck on into activism. They become volunteers. Like you're seeing here the train station of Uzhgorod and people who are cooking and feeding 5,000 people a day there. The woman who's heading all this has been a cosmetologist until February 24th. I mean, she's still a cosmetologist, but now she's actually, yeah, she's leading this group of volunteers. And so many volunteers, so many activists we were talking to were saying, like, I do not know where I take this power from. I don't sleep much, I don't eat much, but I'm there all the time helping people, this and this and that. Yeah. Some people already say like they have digestion problems and so on, but this is like a very, very typical picture. So what I wanted to say, and this is even for all your countries, like, do not look only at the people who suffered primarily, but also please keep the activists in mind. Keep the volunteers in mind, keep the helpers in mind. Very often in countries in non-Ukraine by the media. I went on my trip back from Ukraine. I just came back from Ukraine, and I had a stopover in Krakow because it takes like from Kiev to where I'm now, it takes like now 2.5 days because of checkpoints and borders and trains and all of that. And at the hairdresser, my hairdresser invited a couple of other people, like just her friends, because she knew that I came from Ukraine and she wanted me to talk about it while she's cutting my hair. I didn't know about that. That was an interesting idea. But people actually really said, I feel so helpless and I feel like I have all this energy for doing something. I really want to rescue someone, but I can't. And this is also a byproduct of the media coverage. Like, you watch the media, you get activated, you have like the moral framework of really, I want to do something. And it is difficult because you're not in the country, you might not have access to refugees, you're not volunteering in a shelter, right? So this is a whole complex that we should not lose track of, that there are a lot of activists, a lot of volunteers in different countries, but also very much in Ukraine, who direct their hypervigilance into help responses and who also need grounding at some point, will not be able to stay in this forever. Of course, you also have the stuck on off, the immobilization, the closing down, the not being able to connect, not being able to look other people in the eye. Several people told us the stories of their houses, and we're not able to look directly into our faces. There are many people who were evacuated and then they're in one city, like let's say in Dnipro or in Zaporizhia, and they should move on, but they cannot decide where, how, what to do. Even in other countries, you have a lot of Ukrainians who are at one place, but they don't know whether they will move on or stay here. And I heard stories that their hosts, they interpreted this as like lack of gratefulness, like we did everything for you and we really try to make a safe place for you here, and you never know whether you're going to stay or go. So this is also very important to keep that in mind. This not being able to decide is very much connected to this, as far as I perceive it, in Ukraine and beyond Ukrainian borders. So now my PowerPoint doesn't really move, which is interesting. Oh, there it is. Coming back to the question, how to work with it. This is one of a very few pictures that are a little bit older. This is a picture from Triorizbenka, where I like to work very much, that is now occupied and where we cannot work anymore. And you can see how kids are playing with these like soapy balls. I have no idea how you call that, bubbles, like soap bubbles. And you can see very much they are orienting, they are moving, and they are in contact with each at the same time. And you can even see a handicapped person. There were more people around who's watching them and also like participating in the event. So orientation is not only super important for us as people talking to them, and this is what I just tried to provide you with, like a basic orientation in the landscape of war, but orientation is also necessary in the same landscape, which is a landscape of resilience, right? Like it's at the same time a landscape of war, a landscape of trauma, and a landscape of resilience. So everywhere you have people helping each other, everywhere you have kids playing, everywhere you have these great deeds of heroism, these moments of kindness that make other people cry, this gratefulness. And maybe we can get back later to it, but what I experienced in the past 2 weeks is that several people showed like a natural capacity to pendulate actually between what was really, really horrible and what gave some hope, and what was super painful and what actually created some joy even in the darkest moment. And you will also see that in refugees that you're encountering. And I think this is one of the most beautiful things, just to support this like natural pendulation that is very fascinating, and that I would say I've never experienced it as much as in the past 2 or 3 weeks. But this might be just my perception, that I never have expected it less than in the past 2-3 weeks, and I saw it and I was very surprised. Of course, actively doing things together is also a very important thing. Like from our experience, it's much more effective to just prepare some food together, or play a board game or any game, or sing together, than to do very sophisticated things. Being together, like here you see the director of the Human Rights House in Chernihiv and a woman who completely lost her house, taking rubble together to the place where the rubble is then taken away. And you see that she's actually smiling. She's actually looking very like powerful with like pulling this thing. She looked pretty different before, when she was still like standing there and talking about their house. On the other side, you see people talking while they're building up their houses. This is also like a very, very strong bond of family that helps, friends who help, just people who help each other in building up, like building up the country, building up my house. This is movement, a movement that seems to me rather painful, but I really want to share it with you, is the movement of collecting like very small shells. In the area's shell, you have like everywhere these small shells. And I just heard from a friend who was in Irpin and who talked to a man who was like collecting these shells. You have to collect them by hand, like one by one. They're really sharp. Who said, I want my grandkids to play around here one day. I want my dog to run freely here today. I want my chicken to be able to live in this ground. So I have to pick every single shell that I find in the ground. And he did it. And for me, this is also a picture that you can very much see as a metaphor for what has to happen. Like we have to take out all these small shells together, actually, and to create a ground where children can play and dogs can run and chicken can wander. In this landscape thing, I think right now Ukraine is full of metaphors. Like you have a lot of disconnection through the fact that bridges are blown up. Many places are in this disconnection, and it's very much symbolized by these destroyed bridges. A lot of roads are not passable. The country is very fragmented. You have occupied parts, former occupied parts, shelled parts, non-occupied parts. Families are fragmented. So what is really interesting, and for me, of war and landscapes of resilience, is that there are so many parallels to the body and so many parallels to the nervous system, with bridges and roads and checkpoints where you have to stop and where you have to identify yourself and you have to orient yourself. And this, it helps me. It might be also something that helps you to understand that, like, the country as a body and the personal body have a lot of parallels in this landscaping of pain and landscaping of resilience. One thing I would like to show you is this photo, and this is a photo from Translators. I already said that I worked there. I really love to work there. I spent most of my weekends there last year with my dear friend Lila, who you see in the picture. She's the paramedic of Translators. She's like the medical authority of the whole area. A really exceptional woman who asked me to tell her and teach her everything I know about somatic experiencing, because it's so fascinating, and who is always eager to learn and get to know new things. Whatever I bring from the West, she loves it. She wants to hear more about it. She's under occupation now. Our contact is very limited. I'm really happy every day. Every time she writes to me like every 2 weeks or so, because I know that she's still alive. Her husband, who you see in the medical car behind, has had a heart attack in the bomb shelter 2 weeks ago. So what I want you not to forget is that the situation we have now is still, hopefully they will be liberated at some point, and there will be more people coming, more people striving to go to safe places, more people with different experiences, and maybe even different from these 3 groups of experiences that I was talking about before. I also chose this picture because my last topic is contact. And for me, the work in Ukraine became very effective. And for me also, my personal help response to Ukraine is a very natural thing, because I am in touch with the people. My team is Ukrainian. My closest team member is fighting in the army right now. About Lila, my friend, so much new knowledge, and so much also already before the war, so much new knowledge and so much connection with the place, connection with the people, that it's coming actually very natural to be curious, because they are curious and they have a lot of knowledge about many things that I didn't have any knowledge about, also about war, also about resilience and in war, right? So the personal contact very much helps to maintain curiosity and openness, and to feel safe yourself while talking to people who have experienced possibly horrible things. And with this encouragement to just make personal contacts, meet people who are also activists, find people who are also therapists, psychologists, or social workers. Maybe you are in touch with a family, maybe someone is staying at your house, then you already know what I'm talking about. But I think this contact from human to human is one of the most effective tools that can help us to feel safe and be open and be curious during dealing with war-affected people, not only from Ukraine, but basically from everywhere. And here I'm, oh no, this I still want to show. we have established already more than 1.5 years ago a trauma support service for people from Belarus that is called Phoenix. That has opened now for Ukraine, and we are working. Our team are only therapists working with body-oriented methods, and we are very much trying to spread body-oriented methods in Belarus and in Ukraine and among refugees, and also psychologists and psychotherapists who are refugees in different countries. So what you've heard and seen is all very much connected with this work. We made a comic about conflicts and how to decrease your stress and increase your connectedness with other people in conflicts and all sorts of things. And we have a Telegram address that you see there. We have an Instagram account. So if you want to know more, you can have a look at this. The Instagram account is purely in Russian, but I'm sure you will feel the energy. So this is it for now. Thank you very much. And I'm very curious and open for your questions now.
Stepan, vymětal.
Thank you very much. It was not question, but okay, it was my reaction. Thank you very much. It's very important to inform the people in European countries about the reality of the people on the way, or refugees, or coming to here and back, etc. As well as for me, it was important because I'm involved in strategic group of Czech government dealing with migration topic. So thank you very much. I will use your information in my work. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And as you say information, I just remember that I have forgotten a whole part of my presentation, because there was a part, and this was actually the beginning of why I'm doing this lecture, is that we are often using words and sentences that might be triggering to people in Ukraine. And this happened to me in 2 SE seminars of the task force, and when I mentioned it, they asked me to do this lecture. So I knew, okay, you want to hear something about triggering words and triggering sentences. And I was sitting in our car with my team members on the way between two, one formerly occupied village and one heavily shelled village. And I said, so now you have to help me. You're Ukrainian. I will speak to these people. I can actually, whatever you find triggering, whatever you find painful, just tell me. And they were like, can I have a Snickers first? Like, do we really have to talk about it now? So I said, okay, I'm going to mention this and this and this and that. And they said, yeah, this is fine. Afterwards, we came into a little bit of a discussion, but and this was like a group discussion. So what you hear now is like not like only my experience with people, but actually my team is speaking to you. So what is definitely triggering? If you say Ukrainian crisis, because it's not a crisis, it's a war or it's a genocide, and it should be called what it is. And because saying crisis could diminish it in the eyes of those who suffer from it. I think it's okay to say humanitarian crisis. It's okay to say this war creates a humanitarian crisis, or even this war creates a humanitarian catastrophe. This is absolutely okay, but it's not a crisis, it's a war. Also, some people trigger heavily on the word conflict, because for a long time it was called a conflict or an armed conflict and not a war, which has also been perceived as diminishing of what is there. I would also strongly remind you of the beginning of the war that was in 2014, many people now say, like, before the war, what did you do before the war? But before the war was in 2013, actually, or in the beginning of 2014. So it is much more appropriate to say before the full-scale invasion. Like, everyone understands that. Before the full-scale invasion is fully clear for everyone. Another thing people are very often very upset about is when people in other countries, particularly in the West, start talking about dialogue and about peace, like what we need is peace now. And I imagine that you can understand, I mean, this is not an ethnic conflict, right? This is an invasion of Russia into Ukraine that has been going on basically since 2014 and is now at a high escalation. So ideas like getting Ukrainians together with Russians and they can talk to each other in a peaceful environment are great for after the war. But as long as people's homes and relatives are shelled by Russian by the Russian army, it's very difficult to talk about peace. It's very difficult to talk about dialogue, and it's forming some kind of an expectation, like, we will help you if you will agree for dialogue. So many organizations or like initiatives think now, yeah, we need peace, we need dialogue, we need to be friends again. Of course, that would be great. But right now, this is more triggering than helping. Like, right now is not the time to create an open meeting between Russians and Ukrainians if it is not like very well prepared in a very special context, like you need to be a super professional to be able to frame that in a way that that it's going fine. Like, wait for another half a year, hopefully. Like, I really hope it's that the combat, the war is over soon, and all these initiatives will be very, very welcome. But right now, it's important to see that that there's just active combat, active shelling going on, and that it is not a conflict between two societies, and it's not Ukraine attacking like Russian society. What I might just leave it here. You can still have questions. I think you understand the way I'm thinking. What I find also super important is, do not be afraid of being triggered yourself, and do not afraid of being helpless yourself. You're talking to other human beings, and you can you can still say, when I hear what you're telling me, I feel helplessness in myself, and I wish you told me what we can do together now, or what I can do for you. So this fear of being triggered and fear of helplessness is in our way, and we can actually be relieved from it when we're open about it with those who have also suffered from a lot of helplessness and fear. Now questions again.
Esma?
Great. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Hello, Imke. I'm Esmat. And I have a question, and I trust that you only answer what feels right, because I don't really know how to frame it. But I was wondering, like, how do you and other practitioners go through the work that you're doing? Like, do you take one-on-one sessions? Do you develop do you have your own set of somatic practices? Anything that maybe appeared recently? And the second part of the question, how do you work now when maybe one-on-one sessions are not available because of time and everything else? Is there something like maybe like, and it sounds maybe funny, but like prescribing like somatic practices, like little things or just frames for people, like what you said, like contact from human to human is the best way to feel safe. Like, are there any other things that that you try to pass on? I think that's sort of, yeah, what moves me. And thank you so much for your presentation and your presence right now.
Yeah, thank you, Esmat, for the question or questions, I have to say. So what helps me is community, like being connected with my team members, being connected with friends, meeting after work in the evening. And we're still talking about the war all the time, but it is out of a connectedness, and that is helping me a lot. Of course, I have one-to-one sessions all the time. Of course, I have supervision all the time. I also strongly recommend it to everyone not to forget to take care of yourself and do both. And of course, we are also doing what we preach, right? Like all these little things, like the karate point and blowing on your thumb, and like you know, all these things. If you feel that you know too little, you can take a training with us, because this is what we're teaching people. We're doing that a lot. We're trying to be outside very much. We're trying to do orientation, movement, contact for ourselves all the time, like all the time. I get up from and get some tea, and I try to feel my feet on the ground and all this. It's like, yeah, that's what helps me. And then when there are moments that are really there, I tell you one moment, right? When I'm at work and when I'm having like my SE practitioner coat on, like my imaginated, then actually I can let go almost everything through my body. And I have quite an experience of really letting things go through, and I do well. But it's these unexpected moments. And I will tell you my last moment in Kiev. I left Kiev with the night train. So I had to leave my team. I was going by myself. And I was actually standing. I was going up to the platform, and we were already thinking, okay, like there was another person I knew, another friend, but who was going in another train carriage. And we were already thinking, okay, what's going to happen? How am I going to cross the border? La, 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 la. And then we came up and we saw on the other platform, that was the last platform, like one ambulance next to the other. All these ambulances were open, and this red and blue light was coming out because it was already like 10 o'clock. It was already completely dark. The train station was rather dark because of darkening. And there were soldiers standing around. And this was like, this hit me really hard, because it was clear, okay, a train from the east is about to come, and wounded soldiers are about to be carried out there. And this is what happened. So a train came, the windows were sealed, and people came out. First, those who could still walk, partly without arms or like without one arm, partly on crutches without like half a leg. And I was just standing there, and I couldn't take my glaze away until my train left. So I was standing there, and what helped me is just this interesting, like you can observe that now, and at the same time just observe what is going on in your body, and just keep with both things at the same time. And this is actually what I think what's most essential. As long as you can observe what is going on in your body while you see something that is really like taking you out of your shoes, you're still kind of safe.
Oh, thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
And also Lydia from Germany, she wanted to have some question, but she will be back in 5 minutes. So maybe if somebody else, but for now it's very inspiring. Thank you. Oh, Asa?
Yeah, hello. Thank you for telling us all this of your experience. I'm a little curious. Have you been working with children, and are you working with them in a group, or how do you start to introduce movements or playing? Is there any reaction that here is someone coming up from outside and want us to play and do things which we are not used to do? Or what do you meet, and how do you introduce yourself when you're coming and start?
I find it relatively easy to work with children in the shelters, because in the shelters you have already like a couple of kids, you find them somewhere playing together, and then you just start something and there will be just more and more kids coming. Often also in the shelters, there are already volunteers active, and you can just get in touch with the volunteers and say, hi, like we would like to come in and do something. Shall we do something together? So like the first thing would be contact the local people, contact the people who are already somehow connected to the shelter, and go in through them. The kids, they will find you faster than you find them. Like no worries. And usually they also are interested in what you have with you, like the soap bubbles, or like a big tiger, or a Hoberman sphere. Like children seem to love Hoberman spheres. I did not know that before. And they start playing with it themselves, and this is nice, and this is fun, and that you can just let them playing with the stuff for themselves for a while, and give them the time to get orientation with the stuff you brought, with your presence, with like something new coming up, and then you just start. And I think it's always really nice if you also can pick up something from their experience, like, well, singing songs, singing something they would like to sing. Not this like I come in here and I present something completely new to you, but this like, now I show you something, then you show me something, like very much this reciprocity in the process. What I was really surprised about, this is a friend of mine who's also an SE practitioner told me about, that is how well the soap bubbles work. This is also what I showed you in the photo. And anything that is any game, anything that is pendulation between stillness and activation and movement will actually work. And at some point, I'm like, sometimes I have the eagerness to really include everyone into the game, and even those who keep separately. But sometimes that is not even necessary. Sometimes there is not the capacity, and sometimes they already benefit from just being in the same room where other kids play, where there's movement going on. So don't force anything. I just get into this movement of into this like mood of playing myself. I really like playing and singing. So yeah, it's more thinking about I'm gonna play than I'm gonna do therapy. That helps me a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then Lydia from Germany.
Oh, and then bring chocolate, like chocolate. It's just give them chocolate. They won't leave you. You can do whatever you want.
Perfect. And I just want to mention that we have another Vala here, and on the East website there is a very nice book about the reducing stress for kids, Dancing with Dragons. And also on these East pages we have materials from Maggie Klein and tutorial how to work with children. So also you will get, if you want to have more information about getting how to work with children. But Lydia has her word now.
Maybe just one quick thing. What is also what I consider really great, what I said before, is just doing simple things together, like cooking together with children and their mothers, or like doing something very, very normal and with several generations together. I think this is also really, like, not separate the children all the time from the parents, but really do something in the shelter community, in like just with different people of different ages. and doing a like everyday thing and giving it some playfulness. Like this is actually super effective. Yeah, Anna is nodding. That is giving me some comfort now.
Thank you. And Lydia, do you hear us?
Hi,
Yes.
do you
Perfect.
hear me?
Yes.
Ah, okay. I try in English, but it's not so well because my second language is French, but I think I get it. I'm doing a group for children in a hotel with about 20 children, and just for playing, painting, and so on. And for next week, they organized a translator, and they told me the Red Cross, La Croix Rouge. I don't know the word in
The Red Cross, yeah.
the Red Cross. Okay, they told me about sending a Russian translator. So that I found that a little bit strange. I don't know how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a practical question because there are just more Russian translators than Ukrainian translators,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And also, for example, until the full-scale invasion, I was speaking Russian only in the trainings and every time because I'm working in the East, and in the East, the everyday language is Russian. For most people from Ukraine, until the full-scale invasion, and even more so until the war, the normal everyday language is Russian. Every Ukrainian understands Russian. However,
even
the language can be triggering now. Well, I don't think this is relevant for kids. So for kids, I wouldn't have any problems with Ukrainian. More for grown-ups because this is not triggering because usually this is not triggering because of like trauma experience, but because of a moral and political decision to associate Russian language with Russia and the Russian army, and like this is a part of the enemy landscape now. But with kids, I don't see that this is so problematic. I mean, it's better to have it with a Russian translator than not having it at all.
Okay.
So
yeah,
that would be
good.
my opinion on it.
That's good. Thank you. By the way, last week they introduced me as a psychologist, which was not a good idea because people told me that they never go to psychologists and so on, and that seems to them very strange. So yeah, it's like that. So I said, no, I'm not a real psychologist. I'm doing arts and so on, and find another relationship, and then this professional stuff. No, it's not good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You will always find a way out of it, out of the stereotype.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Stepan, once more.
Yeah, I have a question. Do you have a specific recommendation for work with extremely vulnerable groups like rape, people with a rape experience or tortured experience or bereaved children, etc.? Some specific recommendation to how to work with this extremely vulnerable groups? Or
you mean working in the like in therapy, or how to meet them in general?
Maybe in general, or in therapy. Maybe you have some differences in this field.
Well,
okay, both questions.
Yeah, I think like in therapy, it's the question is simply how do I react? Because I know a lot of therapists who find it like who are afraid of dealing with tortured people, with people with a war-connected rape. So as long as I understand that I can hold it and I can hold a container, I think it is it's very much, you just very much do normal SE sessions, a lot of titration, and that's okay. And for general, I would say, understand that you don't understand what can be triggering. Understand that you don't understand what is across the limits. Understand that these people don't even know where the limits are anymore. Like there is like there can be full confusion considering boundaries. So everything you do that does not expect from them, or like as long as you do not formulate an expectation, as long as you leave them to express how they would like things to do now, as long as you don't give advice when no one has asked for advice, I think this is already like a great thing. And also, I mean, victims of rape are human beings. And first of all, in therapy, and also when we just meet them, we treat them as human beings. So the rape is not standing in front of the human character and the resilience of the nervous system. And as long as I know that, and my system knows that, I can connect better. So this is like a super short answer. I could talk about that for like hours, because I mean, this is what I'm doing, but this is like in a nutshell.
Thank you.
So, okay, let's see. Oh, Esma.
So just a brief practical question. Can you share anything about the trainings you do, and if I can already participate, even though I haven't finished my SE training yet? I'm like halfway through.
Well, the more difficult thing will probably be that you don't speak Russian, but because we're very focused on doing things in Ukraine and with your Ukrainian and Belarusian therapists and activists, but you can get in touch with me via Instagram or via Phoenix, and then we can just talk about it, and maybe we can organize something. Like I can easily, I could easily do such a training in English or in German. We just need to find the context. And this is probably also something like a question for the task force. Like if the task force is interested in like these like small methods, what you do, like emotional first aid, blah, blah, what you do in a shelter, what you do like this. I'm sure there are people who can talk about it. It's not only me, but I'm of course very happy to talk about how I work. And maybe this could also be like a common effort together with Anna, together with others who share how they actually work now. And every one of us has their little secrets, you know, this one thing that works every time. So I'm very much open for exchanging these small practices that we really like.
Yeah, and I just want to tell you that yes, this is the this is the intention of SE Ukraine Task Force, really picking all these methods. They are all SE based. Yeah, so this is really because it's SE Ukraine Task Force, and if you want to be a volunteer, you can go to the web page I put into the chat, so you can also be like not just in Ukraine, but you can be in your country. So this is really somehow the hub for SE-based principle, how to create counter vortex and really to heal our people. So this is our goal, and I think that we will continue with Imke, and we will really find something to create, and also with Anna and Hilary, and Liana is here. So, you know, people, you are great that you came. Maybe if there is no more, because it's almost 8:45, and this. So Sylvia, please unmute yourself. So I will ask to unmute you. So maybe.
Okay.
Yes,
So,
perfect.
thank you. Probably I start supporting the health department in my city. And would you like more working with the Ukrainian people one by one or better in a group?
And what if both was like at the same time? I can't decide because it so much depends on the context. And my experience is once you've worked with people in the group, there will be much more readiness to come to you in like a one-on-one setting. So we had like 3 weeks ago, we had a training with psychotherapists and psychologists and social workers in Lviv, who were like coming with this like skepticism, yeah, and let's see. And after the first day of training, more than 50% of them asked for consultation, like for a private session, even though this was the Orthodox Easter. Like the Orthodox Easter is a bit later than our Easter. So they actually devoted time that is like Easter time actually for going for a therapy session. I was very impressed by that. And I think the collective work and like being able to watch the therapist or trainer from a safe space, from not having to commit anything, can be a great entrance to saying, okay, that person is okay and I can go for a single session. So I would start with group, but then open to always like Eve. That's also how Phoenix works. When we do trainings, we always say whoever is on a training is now like in our training program, which means that you can get free sessions with our therapists. So this is not a fully SE thing. This is with different body-oriented people and methods. But yeah, but a lot of people first take part in a training, and then they come for private sessions. It's my experience.
Okay, so yeah, I understand. Thank you very much.
Seems that we are really going to the end. So, Imke, I just really want to thank you from bottom of my heart that you really came here and you share your knowledge with all of us. And I hope that we will continue with some short SE programs also, and we can put it to the SEUTF webpage like the treasurer. And for all SEPs, they can use it and they can really use your knowledge for helping people and in and out Ukraine. So, and thank you all for coming, and I hope that you will have nice evening, and please feel your feet, find some resources, some orientation, and because the topic was really hard, and so really think about yourself and think about your self-regulation. And last word for Imke, and bye from SEUTF.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks to all of you. It's highly motivating for us that there's so much interest and a great sense of community. And for me, it's not usual that I have a sense of community outside Ukraine, because there's very often a lack of understanding. So thank you for looking at me right now in this understanding way. And if you have any further questions, if you want to know more about our work, anything, you can just contact me. The task force, Zlata, can give you my email, my phone. I'm very happy to exchange thoughts and experiences with all of you. And I'm very happy to participate in further task force events, because I think this bridge making between people in Ukraine who are affected by war and the SE community and even a more broad community of people who are interested in that and interested in being a part of it and being a part of the support. I think this is also one part of my mission or of my task right now. Have a good evening, and thank you very much for coming in.